Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Youth Economy. Mr. President, some of us in here may not agree, but I still feel and associate and identify with the term youth. I will defend my right to do so because maybe it's because of the amount of interaction and time I spent, or I have spent, in my entire lifetime. I think it's well known by now, in the youth movement, in the youth and sports council, and many other youth-related activities. In fact, only on Sunday, I was a very sought-after guest at a youth activity in my community, football final, and I want to take this opportunity, with your leave, Mr. President, to commend the Young Roots football team of Grace, whom emerged winners, and the under-19 team who actually placed third, as well as the veterans team. So, Mr. President, just by way of context, I wanted to establish that I have been involved in the youth leadership movement all of my life, and even now that I think I may have eclipsed the age at which you officially be called youth, I can relate. And this is why this youth economy bill has excited me so much. Mr. President, when the Prime Minister, the then opposition leader, announced the youth economy as part of his mandate, or if he's given the mandate to run this, to lead this country, that he would have introduced this concept. As a young man who understands the realities that our young people face in this country, being aware of the level of youth unemployment and the various social challenges that face our young people, I was very excited. And so I paid attention as the concept was being discussed and was ventilated in the public domain. And at this point, Mr. President, I'm very proud to be standing in this honorable Senate to discuss and to debate this bill. Mr. President, it is not just one of those things that politicians offer and talk about in a manifesto or on a political platform, and 5 years later they have not touched or followed up on. It is one of those things that after 1 year in office, and we're just on the anniversary of our first year in office, we have come to this House to ensure that this concept, this offering, becomes reality. I want to commend the Honorable Prime Minister for doing so, and I want to also commend all the various entities, the various government departments, the various organizations who have been involved both in the consultations that have taken place, in the discussions, and even the critics who have found maybe a few areas that can be tweaked and fixed at this point. Mr. President, I can relate to the needs, the dreams, the aspirations, the ambitions of young people. I was once in that position, coming from a very ordinary, humble background, and recognizing that to be able to aspire to higher heights as a young man, there are certain decisions you have to make, but you need the support of others. There are some things you cannot achieve on your own. You need the support of others, whether it is your family, whether it is community organizations, the church, NGOs, and the government. As a young man or woman, without the resources at your fingertips, sometimes your dreams and ambitions can be shattered. And so, I think back in the late 80s and early 1990s, Mr. President, and I was saying, what if the youth economy had been rolled out then? I probably wouldn't be standing in this honorable House. I might have been a, mega business executive somewhere, living large. So, Mr. President, maybe my children and grandchildren will have the opportunity to benefit from such a piece of legislation. Mr. President, I will repeat something that I have said from 2016 upon my entry into this honorable house. I've always said, no matter what the bill or the motion is, once it relates to people, I've always said that in this country, this Helen of the West St. Lucia, without oil, without some of the natural resources that other countries have, our biggest asset is our human resource. I've always said that, and I will continue to remind this House and our people that this is our biggest asset, our human resource. And if we can shape, create opportunity, mobilize resources, and invest in them while they are young, when they are beginning to form their identity, they're beginning to understand the world around them, we are sure to do a lot better as a nation. So any investment in young people in this country will get my full support. As a matter of fact, when I was a young man, I was also involved in finding ways, mobilizing resources, mobilizing young people to help them improve themselves. So I see this as something that mirrors my own philosophy and my own understanding of what an economy and a country should be. Mr. President, the Prime Minister in his budget speech on page 14 made specific reference to the youth economy. And this particular bill is consistent with the policy pronouncements that he made at the time. Now, this is saying to us that this is in line with the policy and the pronouncements that our government made even before we got into government. We are not just snatching at things loosely and randomly to present to this country. This is a very comprehensive piece of legislation, and it is in line with what we as a government have always intended to do for our young people in this country. Mr. President, part of the youth economy concept will include an agency, a youth economy agency. As anything else, once you are going to introduce new programs in your country, you need to ensure that there is proper administration, management, evaluation, and to do so, you have to ensure that there are competent persons who can organize and deliver the program. And so this agency will have to have a certain level of expertise and flexibility that will manage and help to implement the youth economy program. Mr. President, just by way of example and maybe a little detail, this agency will comprise or will have a composition of a board, and the personnel on that board will include persons with, of course, legal expertise, persons with communication skills, IT and business development skills. There will, of course, be a CEO because you have to have some kind of structure. It's not going to be vai-ti-vai. There will also be some form of evaluation ongoing, and that evaluation will be managed by an evaluation committee. Now, Mr. President, anytime you introduce things, whether it is in a government, in a business, in an organization, it is important that as things are rolled out, you evaluate, whether it is every quarter, but you do ongoing evaluation of what you are doing, because there are times where you have to return to the drawing board and say, look, this is what we wanted to do, but because of circumstance X or Y, we have to revisit and reprogram. And so this evaluation entity, I take it very seriously. As a former educator, I understand the importance of evaluation. You go to a classroom and you think you have taught well, and everybody says, yes, sir, I understood. You give an exam or you do an assessment, and then you realize you have to go and reteach, because saying that you get it doesn't mean that you get it. So evaluation is a very important component of any program, and I understand why this is included in this particular case. One of the other things that will be done, Mr. President, is that there is going to be some kind of auditing that is in line with international standards. And all of that is part of the evaluation. You have to audit. You have to make sure that there's accountability for the monies that people are going to be spending. It's our taxpayers' money. And we have to ensure that those the money is vested in to spend have to account for it. So there has to be standards set. Mr. President, I just now want to do a little bit of explanation with regard to the program itself, the Youth Economy Program. Not everyone, Mr. President, in this country, particularly young people, not every young person wants to work for somebody. And I think it's a part of our own development as a people that we need to revisit. I remember growing up as a child and my parents would tell me, boy, you have to get a good education and get a good job. And they were thinking, be a banker, be a police officer, be an executive somewhere, work for someone and bring home some money. That was the limited perspective they had on you becoming a successful person. Get a good education and go find a job somebody has to give to you. But I think that a country like ours with so many resources that are in our human base needs to be able to tell our young people, you're not just trying to find a job, but you also need to consider owning a business, owning something, and creating jobs. Because we have a situation with unemployment in this country and youth unemployment. We've never said that it's not so. So if young people can find avenues through this youth economy to be able to have their own businesses, their own enterprises, own something, and not work for someone else, and in the process employ other people, create employment, I think we are going to be in a much better place. Mr. President, listening to some of the critics, particularly coming from the leader of the opposition, I sat here and I listened, and there was a suggestion that when we talk about young people, we should help them to aspire to work for Apple and for Google and for those big companies. Nothing wrong with that. No, nothing wrong with a young St. Lucian accessing employment from international big businesses. Nothing wrong with that. But I do not think that this is the only thing that we should be thinking when we speak of the youth economy. Its objective is not to get young people to try to find jobs where they are working for other people. It is helping them understand that they don't have to necessarily work for an Apple or Google, but they can become the owner of a Google or the next Google or the next Apple. That is the kind of aspiration that this youth economy wants to communicate to our young people. It's okay if you feel that you want to work for some, but it is more important to aspire and to want to be the owner so that you can provide employment for hundreds of other young people. Mr. President, a young person wanting to set up a business in this country can face numerous challenges. I can speak of it because I have also been a young entrepreneur. Never mind, I worked many years for the government. I've also attempted to work for myself as well. And I can tell you some of the challenges you face, legal, this and all kinds of red tape, and you can become very frustrated, especially if you do not have access to resources and finance to get started. It's a reality. And I don't think it is fair that a young man or woman with a serious business idea, a serious concept, who can see where he can go, but just because he didn't have access to, or he didn't have the collateral or the resources to access $10,000 or $5,000 from a cooperative or a bank, that his dream disappears and he becomes frustrated and may turn into one of the hardcore criminals that we complain about. So, Mr. President, this youth economy really seeks to address some of that. Now, another argument that was presented was that this thing is, it's almost like an entity within itself. Yes, it is. But one other thing is, Mr. President, that the youth economy also addresses a number of other things. And it's not just about young people getting money to start a business. It addresses some of the serious issues of self-esteem, some of the serious issues of self-doubt that exists in our young people today. It allows them to think big, to dream. It may start with a small grant. It may start with the access to a small loan, but because of the thinking, that is where everything starts, in here. You as a young person can really look beyond just the start and see how you can place yourself later. Mr. President, there has to be a method that guides the way young people can access the services that will be offered through the youth economy. And that may be one of the challenges we have to deal with in the earlier stages. And we are open to, as I said earlier, going back and doing the evaluation and coming back to fix it. For example, a young person may decide that they want access to a certain amount of money, and they don't know where to go or which form to fill out or which agency to seek the assistance from. And that is why there is going to be a form designed, a method that will give a young person the option of being able to register and seek and get guidance. Mr. President, it is also important for young people to be able to get training, because the youth economy is not only about starting a business. Some young people may already have a small business operating. I know some young persons who they have, especially during the COVID period, they have to find ways to make money without leaving home, and they have online businesses. But because their resources are limited and they don't have the competence to be able to expand it, they need ideas. And the youth economy also provides for training for young people in several areas that can help them develop their small business. So if you haven't gotten started, there's room for you to expand. If you haven't started, there's room for you to get started. But if you have started, there's room for you to expand. Mr. President, once this is done, a young person will be able to access different amounts. So for example, if you're going to set up a business for the first time, you would need to get some kind of guidance in terms of your business plan and incorporation. You may be able to access grants or loans. And if you qualify, then you may be able, if you have a business already established, to be able to qualify for access to training in marketing, in business development, and whatever other skill or competence that your business requires. Mr. President, it is important for us to be familiar and support the idea of upskilling, which is one of the components I think this bill will be helping to push. You see, sometimes you know people who have been involved in a particular type of business or particular type of service. And since you were a child, they're doing the same thing the same way. 20 years, 30 years later, you go back there and they're doing the same thing, and they have not improved. This youth economy concept will ensure that we don't only provide a start, but we help young people upskill. Because as technology becomes part of business and business transactions and business development, they have to be what we call with it. And so upskilling is one of the areas that we think is very important. Of course, branding and market research is key. Now, I am no business person. I think my background was in social development, science, more or less. I'm no business expert. But the basics of marketing, which I totally understood when I became a football administrator, you have to have a brand. In anything you do, you have to develop your brand. And that is very important. That's why Apple and them and Google, they have a brand. There's something that makes them different. And so this is something that the Youth Economy program seeks to do. Ensure that there is enough research and marketing done, and help young people who are desirous of setting up or taking advantage of this opportunity do some good branding. So, Mr. President, grants and loan facilities. Now, a grant really is what we call free money, but we don't want young people to think that there's a mini bank that you can just go get money. I think the leader of the opposition tried to describe the youth economy as a mini bank. This is not the case. It is really not that way at all, Mr. President. It's not just about the loans. As the Prime Minister put it, it's helping young people develop their hobbies into entrepreneurship and to develop their skills into businesses. It's not about just getting money. It's about being able to develop other things. So, Mr. President, we have to pay attention to what is it we have. One example, we're completely surrounded by water as an island. So we have the ocean and the sea right around us. And the blue economy comes to mind. This is an opportunity for young people to be able to explore what is around us. Of course, there are some CMOS farmers are already tapping into it. But there are many other very important initiatives that can be accessed because of our mere location as an island. The orange economy, Mr. President, dealing with the creatives, the arts, the culture. I find myself within a ministry that is responsible for the creative industries and culture. And it is very important that we help to develop that particular area, because it is an area that I think as a country we have fallen short of exploring and making use of. There's a lot that we can do through our creatives to showcase what we are and who we are as a people. And that youth economy will help to make linkages between this department and the ministries responsible like tourism, investment, creative industries, and so on. Mr. President, it is also important to look at the possibilities within the green economy, being able to reduce environmental risks while you set up and develop a business. Use of the concept of recycling of waste. We have a problem with sargassum. We have a problem with plastics. There are young people, I remember during my time as a teacher, as a science teacher, there was what we call the science fair. And young people every year came up with all kinds of ideas that they could use to recycle, to be more climate conscious and resilient. And you know what happens to that? Most of these, they get a little trophy and a nice clap, and some of these concepts find themselves shelved somewhere and never get to be developed. I think that this is an opportunity where a child in school can begin to see how I can use my science fair concept, my science fair project that got a nice trophy and a winning prize, and then look forward to the next 3 or 4 years where I can take that, develop it, get the training, and then the youth economy will help me grow and develop that into a serious business opportunity. So, Mr. President, we are targeting not just youth, as the definition says, between, I think, 13 to 35, but people even before they've reached 30. Young people in the primary schools, young children who can see, they can have a vision of where they can be because they have an idea and they can grow it over time. And when they are able to access this, that they can develop it into a serious business or entrepreneur for them to make a living. Mr. President, some time ago I was privy to what we had described as the export the runway. And at that exercise, I really was taken aback by what I saw on stage. There were people from Soufrière, Choiseul, Deriso, Rosalie. I saw our cricket superstar, Darren Sammy, and his wife. I saw people showcasing authentic St. Lucian products of quality, all types of accessories and outfits and things I didn't even know existed. I got a real education on what can become part of your clothing accessories at this export showcase. And I was seriously impressed with what ordinary St. Lucians can do. But then you have a showcase, what next? So, and a majority of them, Mr. President, were young people between the ages of 13 and 35, most of them. And they may now be looking for an opportunity to now take this product and go further with it. This is what the youth economy is about. I think we can go back to the expo in Dubai when we speak of the creatives and all the Ampa and the Denry segments and all of those. What quality that they displayed in Dubai. These people also need an opportunity to help to expand their horizons and reach the world. We have global quality, we have international quality hair. Boo Hinkson, if I may mention his name. World class, Mr. President. And I'm happy that some of the young people are now going through a program where they can access his expertise. I commend the Ministry of Culture for that. But I want to say, Mr. President, that this will not exist on its own. There will be the connection between this particular agency and the various departments that young people, commerce, agriculture, creative industries, the business community, that young people can use the skills, the training, and the resources that they can access from the youth economy to be able to channel their energies. Mr. President, sometimes we have to learn how to package what we have. And many times, good things that we can sell are not received well because we didn't package it properly. And I believe that we can achieve that through the training that we can provide young people with. Package your idea, package your product, and then you can sell it to the world. You can sell the identity of your country, the identity of yourself as a St. Lucian, and make an honest living out of it. And I do say an honest living. Too often our young people are led to believe that the only way to make a buck is to do something on the side or do something that is not within the parameters of the law. This is an opportunity to make an honest living, to earn something honestly and properly. Mr. President, some of the incentives that the government is going to be offering upfront, because if you're going to ask young people to take a chance, go for it. You need to be able to give them a little bit of backup. You know, they need to look behind them and know that, look, if I slip, you're there with me. Because they can be a little apprehensive. And I believe one of the support systems that will be in place is offering them incentives, duty and tax exemptions, if some of what they need to do requires importing of products and services. And I do say products and services. Mr. President, the environment for the youth economy to survive or to prosper must be created by this government. It must be an enabling environment. It must allow young people to be able to tap into not only what the grants and the loans may offer, but what is there in the private sector. And I think we have persons in this Senate who are members of the private sector, and they understand the nexus between the private sector and government agencies. That kind of support needs to be available. And so we need to allow young people to see it as an opportunity for them to get the backing of government as well as the private sector, for them to be able to not just provide jobs for themselves, but to create wealth and also contribute to nation building. Most of the time, you may want to ask a young man or woman after the age of 20, 30, what has been your contribution to the development of your country? And they may be scratching their heads to figure out, well, I never made a national team, I never had a decent job, but they may very well have had the opportunity to change something in their community or something in their country if that opportunity was granted to them. So, Mr. President, it is important that that message be communicated. One other area that I think the youth economy concept and the youth economy program will also enable is for young people to tap into the e-commerce sector. I did mention earlier during the COVID pandemic that sector grew almost by force. People had no choice. They had to shop online, they had to advertise online. I saw all kinds of things, deliveries and all kinds of new and very welcoming ideas being explored. The youth economy speaks to that. E-business and e-commerce. And for you to be successful there, you must know what you're doing, so you must get the training. So the markets you'll be tapping into are not only local markets, but you can tap into regional and international markets with your product or your service. So, Mr. President, it is important, therefore, that the necessary infrastructure be put in place. Because if you're going to tell young people, look, you can do really well with an e-commerce or e-business concept, they'll have to ask you, but how? Do I have the necessary infrastructure? Do I have the equipment to do so? Some of them may not even have internet access. So things like broadband internet being expanded throughout our island and communities must be looked at. And that was started under the former Minister for Sustainable Development, Jimmy Fletcher, but for some reason I don't think, the last government followed up, because the wind farm and the solar, I don't want to go too much into that. I'll just say the wind farm in Denver is a good example. Nothing explored there. More interested in garbage and rubbish trucks, whatever happened. But Mr. President, that's for another time. I think that we as a government need to make sure that broadband, internet, and the infrastructure for enabling the e-business and e-commerce concepts be developed. So together with the other departments in this country, infrastructure, sustainable development, education, health, tourism, commerce, that all of these sectors can provide the linkages that we need for the youth economy to succeed. And so, Mr. President, in wrapping up, I want to say that this youth economy concept that the Prime Minister introduced when we started our campaign to get into this last election, I am very happy that it didn't just remain a campaign discussion. That today, 1 year into government, we have done the necessary groundwork, because we couldn't have just come there. And I think there was a discussion, Mr. President, when the opposition found nothing else to say. Why now? Why now? Why after 1 year? As if you come into government and you just start doing things like you're a madman. No. Mr. President, they had a full term to explore it. They didn't. 1 year, we have taken 1 year, a little less than that, to do the groundwork, to have discussion, to scan the environment, find out what are the agencies that will be needed, how do you build the networks, and then we come to the Parliament to enact legislation. Because a lot of things we do in this country are not backed up by legislation. We are enacting legislation to make sure that there is backing, legal backing for what is going to happen. And then we are going to do the programming and the implementation. As I said, Mr. President, there is no quick fix. You may see us come back to this House to make amendments to this bill, as we've done before. And this government is not afraid to say, okay, I think we can revisit this. No, we can do that. And as we go along, we may have to do so. But at least, for now, we are coming to this House and being very decisive and getting the legislation right. At least the first step in getting it right. And then the implementation. I want to just say one word, Mr. President, before I end, to particularly mention the gender issue. Because I'm very gender sensitive. Generally, you find the female or the women being the ones who always speak up about issues that relate to women. But I think the most influential people in my life have been women, from my mom and others, my grandparents, my aunts, even my own daughter now. So, Mr. President, I'm very, very sensitive to the gender issues. This is an opportunity for our single women, Mr. President. Our single mothers who have to head households and raise children to finally get an opportunity to tap into resources. And we're not going to treat them the way they were labeled and treated by you-know-who. So, Mr. President, I welcome the Department of Gender Affairs, Gender Relations, to rally with us and to work with us in ensuring that there's an equitable distribution of these resources among young people, male, female, single, non-single, aspiring, and everyone, so that when it is rolled out, every single St. Lucian who needs it most will access it. Mr. President, I look forward to the discussion on this. I believe we should have a discussion on it. I look forward to the areas where we can improve. But for now, I submit this bill to this Honorable Senate for its support and its endorsement, because I think we all can agree that it is totally necessary for the improvement of the lives of the people of this country, particularly our young people. I thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, first of all, I want to thank the members of this chamber who contributed to the bill. And I also want to assure them that, like I said when I attempted to explain the contents of the bill, that it may very well come back to this Senate for amendments, and for improvement. That was established from the onset. And so it came as no surprise to us that some of the comments and observations made are to be considered and are welcome. I will attempt to address a few of them, and some of them may have to be considered for further discussion. Let me first of all get out of the way some of the issues that were raised by the leader of opposition business. Sometimes, Mr. President, it's not what you do, but it's how you do it. And as we noted, there was a particular observation that was raised by the leader of opposition business. Again, I speak to an empty chair. It's been a pattern in the last few sittings that every time I attempt to respond to his, claims or his questions, that I'm speaking to an empty chair. So I don't know if I should. But for the benefit of the opposition, and I do respect that there is an opposition, and at least there is a member of the opposition sitting, so he can convey the message to him that we are trying to respond. Mr. President, as I was saying, it's not what you do, but how you do it. There was a particular issue that was raised, and it was also raised by Senator Lee, regarding the agency and the financing. And I think it was a legitimate point, but by the time the leader of opposition business got to that point, he had muddied the waters so much that he got lost in the discussion, and it became an issue of him attempting to have an exchange with you and everybody else. But Mr. President, let me try to extract the content of the issue. Of course, I think he was trying to make reference to the 20%, but instead of going to the correct section as Senator Lee did, he went to a section that he tried to insert, which is 46. And 49, sorry, and that was incorrect. And I don't think he has learned because, again, because of his absence, he was not able to actually make the relevant section. And I think it was disingenuous of him. However, the issue of the 20% and where it should have been where it should go, I believe that it is more a matter of what is happening because of the initial introduction of the agency and the initial introduction of the whole concept. Some of the expenses incurred, and I'll get to that a little later, at this particular time will not necessarily be incurred as the program is rolled out over the next few years. And I think Senator Lee almost pointed out to it. I think he asked almost in a form of a question whether that is because of the initial setup, and I'll get to that shortly. But just to complete my response to the leader of opposition business, when it's not we did so, our government had done so, the other thing that he would try to do is to find something that is not necessarily in the bill to comment on. So when he couldn't find anything to comment on, he tried to create his own argument by inserting or attempting to insert something, and thankfully my colleague senator was able to point it out. Mr. President, one thing that I noted, there was an attempt to talk about consultancies, not in the way that the independent senator raised it, to suggest that we should not concentrate too much of the funding on services and consultancies, but in the way that he tried to exaggerate the services that we are bringing into this program. I think it's because he himself, he knows what consultancies means to him. Consultancy in our context is a completely different concept, because I just want to draw the example. I don't know if he was thinking about Ernst & Young. I don't know if at the time he was talking about the consultancies in this program, that he was reflecting on Ernst & Young, who was paid, what, $15 million? 15 million? To do something that our budget department can do. And I can say, Mr. President, the $15 million that we had paid, can you imagine what that $15 million could have done for the youth economy? It is 150%. In fact, it is 150% of the entire budget that we have allocated for the youth economy. It's $10 million. And 15, we could have had an extra 5 million, 50% more. And you come here. I mean, I have no problems with an observation about saying, okay, let us not try to spend too much of the money on anything else but the youth. I accept. I accept. And when I get to the comments by Senator Lee, I will respond. But in the context that he tried to raise it, coming from the leader of opposition business, who sat in a cabinet for 5 years and allowed and did not have a problem with a consultancy of a single consultancy of $15 million. I don't want to go into all the others because I have promised myself, Mr. President, that I will not come to stand up in the Senate to try to rehash everything the government of the previous government did. But from time to time, I need to do a little bit of a gentle reminder. I need to do that. Because I do not think that the leader of opposition business has any moral authority to speak about consultancies in this honorable chamber. None. So I have no issue with the message in that regard, but I have an issue with the messenger. So, Mr. President, if I may now try to respond to some of the very legitimate comments that were raised by other members in this chamber. I believe that all of us here mean well, and we want to see that this youth economy concept works. And we cannot pretend that everything about the bill coming here for the first time is perfect. Unlike other bills that we would have brought in that were amendments where there existing legislation, we accept that this is a new piece of legislation. This is the first time it's come into the House. How would we not expect for it to have areas that we can improve on? Of course, we are very much aware of that, and we're very open to revisiting the bill. But for the purposes of its initial introduction into the House, we have to move and we have to come with something that we will try our best to make sure by the time this thing is properly implemented, we would have fixed and adjusted and amended and improved. So with all good intentions, I believe some of the comments that were made are legitimate, and I will seek to now turn my attention to some of Senator Lee's comments. Now, we must understand, Mr. President, sometimes some of us in this honorable chamber do have some advantages in certain areas of our expert knowledge and experience, and it's good that we can bring it to focus on the discussion. I commend that, and I accept it. Whether it is in law, in education, in business, and, well, I do not appreciate some of the experiences that people try to bear in trying to mislead the House. This is one of those I do not like, and I do not think is right, to try to insert something that was not there. That is not what I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of expert knowledge, experience, and legitimate intentions. So, Mr. President, one of the points that was raised by Senator Lee, he did say that we should not make the assumption that all the raw materials are available as per our young people, and they're coming with everything. That is true. It's very unique when you deal with young people. And sometimes in creating opportunities for them, we must remember that because of their age, some of them have not been exposed to certain bits of training. They have not completed their tertiary education. Some of them, they have not had opportunities to receive certain levels of training and expertise. So youth is a very delicate group of people to work with. So you may be dealing with a teenager, for example, who already has a brilliant concept, but is still in secondary school. You can't talk to this person about collateral and some of the things that we expect from an ordinary adult. However, this legislation has to keep these people in mind. So I understand that they may not come with all the raw materials. However, that is why the agency is not a bank. And I think Senator Aziz made reference to it. He said he hopes it's not a bank. The leader of the opposition in the lower house called it a mini bank. And I want to disassociate myself with that. Senator, I can assure you it is not a bank, it's an agency. And an agency has a number of functions. So training would be one of the aspects that will seek to address what the young people are falling short of in terms of what they bring to the table. A lot of them need that, and the agency has made provisions for that. A very important note that was made was the function, the role of the agency. And I think Senator Lee expressed some anxieties about what previous agencies have not been able to achieve. This particular agency is dedicated to the youth economy solely for that purpose. I know that CEDU and NSDC and other agencies were referred to that may have been doing similar things. But it's because of the level of bureaucracy that we've experienced in those that we still have to improve, that this particular agency is dedicated for one particular purpose. Because some of those agencies deal with so many different things that anybody going to them will have to face the bureaucracy. The Youth Economy Agency is dedicated to a single purpose of helping young people access the services and the resources that we have available. A very important observation that I also agree should have been raised was the issue of the education system and how it has a function in enabling what we want to achieve in the youth economy. And Mr. President, I want to make reference to an initiative that the government undertook 2 Mondays ago. You see, what we do in this government is not haphazard. There is synchronization and there is process. 2 Mondays ago, this government had a sword-turning ceremony in cul-de-sac for the construction of a care facility, a center for adolescent rehabilitation and education. Now, Mr. President, this type of agency is a different type of quote-unquote school. And it seeks to do exactly what the senator was asking about. Because he mentioned, I think, a center of excellence. It is not named a center of excellence, but the objective of a facility like CARE is in line with exactly what he's saying. And I'm very happy he raised that. Of course, CARE does not have all the answers, but that is a step in the direction we want to go. And the Prime Minister, in assigning the portfolio of education, included vocational studies as one of the areas under that portfolio. And that is what CARE, a facility like CARE, does to complement NSDC and all the other after-school and what we call continuous education programs that are available. Because young people who did not make it through the regular conventional education system, the grammar schools, have an opportunity to make it through CARE. So I want to give him that as an example of a step in that direction. Mr. President, I also noted that the senator made reference to something that I had mentioned in the science fair, and I think he's very much on point. But one of the things that I think we may have fallen short of, and we can obviously consider, is how to make linkages between the students in school and the private sector. Because that is where you can tap into some of the deficiencies that the regular school system cannot address. And so outside of the formal school, a student with a great idea, for example, in science that has to do with recycling or with production, can be linked with a private sector agency that has already established a business in that segment. I remember one of my former students had a very interesting science fair project, and the agency that was, it was a solar-based type of renewable energy project. And what we did is, through my HOD, my head of department, we formed a relationship with Solar Dynamics at the time. They were a hot water company, and they provided the sponsorship, some of the technical skills and the training for the child to enhance his project, and financing the entire thing. This young man actually eventually started working with the business establishment. Now, the youth economy doesn't just want him to work for that person, but hopefully he would have started to build his product from there. And these types of linkages we must encourage in the education system. There are businesses that exist in this country that we can associate and link, if you want to call them mentors, if you want to call them sponsors or partners with the school, whatever you want to call them, that can be associated with schools to do, we can start with apprenticeship programs to help children or students with ideas that are aligned with that type of business to be able to develop it. And so I believe that that is a move that we can make to help facilitate the process. The senator also made reference to the term activity, and he referenced that you must not try to decide for the young people what are the activities that conceptualize or that they should engage in. I agree. However, in fact, in the previous sitting or in the lower house, one additional activity was added, and it will be done in the amendments at the committee stage, and that was technology. While I agree that you cannot dictate a list of activities, but you have to start somewhere, and that list is inexhaustive. I am sure that young people will come up with hundreds of activities, and even if you add some or you limit some or there will be. So I believe that Senator Lee has made a very good observation, and what we want to do is to continue to review what we consider activities. And I believe that in the implementation process, some of these can lead to perhaps an amendment that can read something like including rather than just one list. So we welcome that, and I think that was an observation that was well placed. Senator Lee also made mention of the issue of the approval by the minister of an appointee on a board, I think. I think that almost every statutory board or agency in this country, in some way or another, in the legislation or in the bylaws, makes reference to the appointment by the minister. But I will leave this one to say that we need to revisit it. I think we need to revisit it because of the unique function of that particular agency. Also, Section 46F was referred to, not in the way that the leader of opposition business did, but I think Senator Jawahir addressed it when she spoke. I followed her when I made a quick trip downstairs, and I think she did address the issue of the site, the business site, not necessarily being a physical site or building, but it could exist virtually. And that should be taken into consideration when we interpret business site, particularly in this age. So I think to some extent that was addressed. However, in the event that an applicant may not be able to have established a physical business site, that would trigger the need for the agency now to assist that applicant with getting a business site set up. So whereas in the initial proposal, an applicant may come to you with an idea, but had not taken into consideration the business site, then because of that requirement, the agency can now say, well, you know, you need a business site for that. Where is your plan? And then we can help you set up a proposal that can include a business site. So it allows for that to be incorporated. Finally, I think with reference to Senator Lee, he made reference to something that I think has been discussed many times, and that is the percentage or the amount allocated for services, consultancies, and all of that. I did explain to the leader of opposition business, now that in his chair I'll repeat, that their concept of consultancy is nothing close to what most of us think it is. And it's not $15 million for a foreign agent entity to do what we can do. However, I want to emphasize that when you initially start an initiative, there would be need right now, not necessarily next year and the year after, but right now, to spend that money or to put these resources into setting up to start up. So it may not necessarily be $5 million in the next rollout, but the initial cost, and let us not underestimate consultancy. It's not that it's a sin. You really need some expert knowledge and advice. You don't want to get started in something and everybody's an amateur. You need people to be properly guided, right? However, it is not something that we expect to be there every single time. We'll have half the allocation going to services consultancies. It is because it is the first initial stage, and so you can expect there to be some initial setup expenses. A couple of very notable points that were raised by Senator Aziz, Mr. President, is the role of the agencies, and he did mention making a paradigm shift, which is a well-noted point. However, I must tell Senator Aziz that in making the shift, he mentioned radical, but sometimes when it comes to young people, you need to be they themselves are already so radical sometimes, that you need to be a little bit gentle and gradual. You need to take your time about it. Because whereas you want them to drive the process, but you want to hold their hands too. So we have to find a balance between radical and gradual. Mr. President, the bureaucracy issue that was raised by Senator Aziz is well placed. I believe the Youth Economy Agency being dedicated to that particular group will remove that. Because the bureaucracy is in the banks, and the example Senator Shalry raised is true. It's everywhere. Young people turn all over, and they can't find anything because they're asking them for all kinds of things that they do not have. This agency, while there are certain requirements, but it is more flexible, and it is the only place that they will be able to find that particular service. So I think that will help to reduce the level of bureaucracy because it's dedicated to that particular role. There was also an issue, the question about being a bank, I think I answered that. Senator Aziz, the agency, the Youth Economy Agency is not a bank. I want to specifically say that it is not. And it is not a mini bank either, not kind of bank, because it's not going to require what the banks require for young people to get started. Banks don't give grants, they only give loans. This agency has a grants component, and so it is not a bank. Finally, trust over performance was a very interesting observation. And I believe young people have felt that in this country we don't trust them. We talk to them, and when they talk back to us, we just think that we know better. And I've been through it because I've been working with them. However, there must be it's a very thin line between trust and accountability. Even if I trust you with something, but I have to find a way to make you accountable for what I put in your hands. And so, at all stages, we have to ensure that we evaluate and there is accountability. That is why some of the checks and balances are in place. It's not to stifle and to prevent a young person who has an idea from going forward with it. But you must say, wait, listen, while I trust what you do, I'm going to take a risk with you. However, you have to understand that you need to account, you need to report. We need to see that what we've invested in you is, you can account for it. And so there I think we need to, just like we did with the initial issue, the initial point with being radical, and I said radical but gentle. Yes, we can trust, but we have to be accountable. Mr. President, one thing I just thought I needed to add as I rebut and complete this rebuttal is that one of the issues with the Youth Economy Agency, or the youth economy itself, is that we intend to ensure that we have mentors involved. Real, serious, accomplished, exemplary business people who can help hold the hands of our young people, especially those who are already in business, when we go forward. And so that is something that I look forward to. Again, Mr. President, I want to thank all the senators who contributed to the bill. I want to thank them for the observations they made, albeit in some different methods were used. It is clearly a bill that is new, and it will need some growth and building on. This government remains committed to reconsidering what it's doing, and at the appropriate time can return to improve on it. In the meantime, I ask that the young people of this country, and I'll borrow the word from Senator Aziz, trust what we're doing. It's for them, and they will need to work with us so we can have this mutual trust. They trust what we're doing, and we trust their ideas. And that is the only way this youth economy can actually work for the people that it was intended for. I thank you again, Mr. President, for your indulgence.